Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got another busy week in the news, the continuing war on Iran, creeping authoritarianism taking over American institutions, and how that affects us right here in Indiana. I've got a couple great guests to join me in talking about all that and more. But first, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers. We don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even to our financial detriment. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, please go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. Like I said, everything's free. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our print articles to your people. You get us whenever you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us. And on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but over on Blue Sky and TikTok, it's PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's welcome this week's guests. First up, a newcomer to this space. From right here in my neck of the woods, it is Monroe County Democratic Party Chair Chrissy Gales. Chrissy, welcome.
Hi, Scott. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad to finally have you here with us.
It's exciting to be here. You've had all my friends and all my colleagues on here, so I felt like it was my turn. So thank you for inviting me.
It was time. Why don't you just briefly introduce yourself to the good folks watching?
Yeah, sure. My name is Chrissy Gales. I am the newly elected chair for the Monroe County Democratic Party. I was elected in July. I was born and raised here in Bloomington. I have experience working on federal campaigns at the congressional level, senatorial level, presidential campaigns, municipal campaigns, Senate campaigns, state house campaigns, just sort of all up and down the ballot. And then when the opportunity to step into a leadership position presented itself last year, I felt called to do so. Bloomington and Monroe County is my home. I don't ever plan on leaving. And I just felt like this was the next natural step for me to help make sure that Bloomington stays the kind of place that it has been to allow me such a great upbringing, and how we can move from being a good place to a truly great place.
You know, we talked in this space before many times about how not necessarily all of Indiana's 92 Democratic Party chairs are at the top of their game. Monroe County here in very good hands with you, Chrissy. So
thank you, Scott.
Now let us move on up to the 574 and welcome returning guest to this space. Eric Love is with us. He's the former diversity and inclusion director at both IU and Notre Dame, and is now the founder and president of Love Force Consulting. Eric, you're missing something since the last time I saw you.
Yes, about 3 or 4 feet of hair. So it's a new look, but it's been maybe 3 weeks. But yeah, I've had dreadlocks for 34 years, I think. So I can go get them if you want to see.
You looked great before. You still look great. What finally made you say now's the time?
Thanks. It had been a long time. I did start to get a little thin on top, and I kind of didn't want to look like maybe Stevie Wonder, or who just had a few in the back. Yeah, it was just time. I was worried about how I would look without them. I didn't know the shape of my head, but and also on Zoom, and when you look at me in the front anyway, it was so far back I looked bald anyway. And then when I would walk past you, you would see all this hair down to my knees, and so yeah,
it's a great party in the back, not a whole lot of business left up front.
Right. Yeah. It's
and there,
something to
somebody
hear.
on YouTube says that you look both dope and fresh. So
That sounds good.
the verdict is in. Now,
Thank you.
so we've got a lot that we have to talk about this week, and I'm going to try something a little bit different. There weren't really a whole lot of meaty Indiana stories for a full hour on the back end of today's show, so we're gonna try and weave Hoosier news into the rest of this week's stories and sort of try and tie everything back to our state. But let's start where we have the last several weeks, and that is in the Middle East. So this week, the cracks in the U.S.-Israel alliance over the Iran war became impossible to ignore. Joe Kent, one of Trump's top counterterrorism officials, resigned, claiming Iran posed no imminent threat and that Israel essentially dragged the U.S. into the conflict, and then immediately ran to Tucker Carlson for a 2-hour interview to talk all about it. Now, though Kent's credibility is complicated by, turns out he was under a months-long FBI investigation into whether he leaked classified information to Carlson and others. Now, Director of National Intelligence, and intelligence is doing a lot of work there, Tulsi Gabbard, largely sidestepped questions about whether the intelligence community agreed Iran was an imminent threat, insisting only the president could make that determination. A dodge that suggests the intelligence community doesn't necessarily align with the administration's assessment. Meanwhile, Oman's foreign minister, who mediated the final nuclear talks, wrote in The Economist that Israel is the driving force behind this war, describing it as a, quote, catastrophe, just hours after the most substantive negotiations in years. He said Iran had made historically significant concessions on uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief, offering a deal better than Obama's JCPOA. A UK security advisor who attended those talks backed him up, confirming the Iranian offer was substantial enough to prevent war. Yet, Israel has spent the week systematically eliminating key Iranian officials and commanders, while Trump and Gabbard both acknowledge the U.S. and Israel have different objectives in this war. Trump claims the U.S. is reining Israel in, but an Israeli strike on a major Iranian gas facility on Wednesday night that sent energy prices soaring suggests otherwise. So I guess I want to turn to you guys and, keeping in mind that criticism of Netanyahu's far-right government and Israeli policy is not the same thing as peddling the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories that Carlson and others engage in. I want to ask, Chrissy, who's really running this thing? Is the U.S. calling the shots, or is Israel wagging the dog?
I mean, it's no secret that Israel has been trying to bait the last several presidents into going into war with Iran. And it just so happens that in this particular president, the easiest way to get him to do something is to flatter him, pay attention to him, be nice to him, pretend to be his friend. This is not somebody who is able to think beyond their initial thought and have any kind of true deep comprehension about not only their actions, but the potential consequences down the road of their actions. This is somebody that we see continually act very impulsively and act in the favor of whoever is the last person he was on the phone with, or whoever he was the last person to have a meeting with. That is who he's agreeing with, and that's who he is inclined to help. And if anything, besides the actual war itself, and let's be clear that this is an unauthorized war that we have gotten ourselves into, and now the administration is trying to backdoor its way into it by getting Congress to approve an additional $200 billion for this war, so that they can turn around and say, no, look, Congress approved the funding for it. They approved this war. But I would like to think that the American people are smarter than that, but the messaging on this entire excursion, as he calls it, because he doesn't understand that what an incursion is, it's just been a complete disaster. There has been, no cohesive messaging coming out of the administration, coming out of the Defense Department. Tulsi Gabbard is contradicting herself. It's the exact kind of chaos that we have come to expect from this administration, and I guess upset, frustrated, disappointed, but not surprised.
Eric,
Yeah.
kind of to what Chrissy said, right? Like that Israel's been trying to bait the U.S. into this war forever. I believe Netanyahu has been saying that Iran was 2 weeks away from having a nuclear weapon for as long as you had those dreads.
Yes. Yep. Over 30 years. And I saw clips over and over and over again with him saying the same thing. That's what got us into the Iraqi war, and many other things. And it does seem like we have systematically been helping Israel eliminate all of their enemies all over the Middle East that were not a direct threat to us. And I do think, I think Chrissy mentioned that Tulsi Gabbard in a report said that Iran is not an imminent threat to us. And then in her testimony, she left that out of her report. And they asked her, why did you not mention the part that you put in your report? And she said, I just didn't have time to talk about it. So, it does seem like something that I think Chrissy didn't mention is, of course, when the second Trump administration took over, they fired all of the experts. They fired all the military experts. They fired, everyone that knew anything about it that had experience. They were called DEI hires because they were people of color and because they were women, but they were actually the experts that had experience, had the expertise, had the background, everything needed to keep us safe and to advise a president. He fired all of those and then put in a weekend TV host who's more concerned about his appearance than he is about anything else, and an alcoholic. So, and I don't just want to character assassinate, but they put in people who cannot keep us safe, who are not smart, who are the actual DEI hires. And in order to be in a Trump administration, you have to be loyal to Trump, nothing else. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to know what's going on. And so I think that's where we are right now. They fired all the experts. So, like nobody could have, Trump said nobody would have known that they could have shut down the Strait of Hormuz. Really? Everybody knew that. Mm-hmm. So all of these mishaps, and we rushed into the war, I think at Netanyahu's beckoning. So we fired all the experts, then they've offended everybody all over the world, all of our allies, raising tariffs, talking about them to their face at international conferences, and then we rush into a war without Congress's backing, without the U.S., even the citizens, weighing in on it, because Trump felt he had a feeling that we should do it, and now we're running into trouble, and now he wants to call all of our allies who he didn't consult with. Even I know you have to consult with your allies, you have to build a coalition and then do something like this. And then he expected, boots on the ground, the Iranian opposition, in Iran to rise up against the government, and with us attacking them and then a swell from internally, then that would have done it. But they don't have any backing, they have no weapons, they have nothing, and so they can't do that insurrection from inside, and we just find ourselves in deep trouble. And our allies are not rushing to help us because we've offended them and because this made no sense to anybody else in the world except Israel and the Trump administration.
And there's so much there. You mentioned that they fired all the experts and they brought in their own people. Like one of the guys they brought in was this Joe Kent guy, and Trump was praising him at this time last year, talking about how wonderful he was and how brilliant he was. And now he's like, he was always weak on terrorism. Like there's just like no consistency with these guys. Like you said, it is sort of just the last, like Chrissy said, the last person who was in his ear. That's who he's going to listen to. This guy, total schmuck. No forethought, no planning.
I have one more comment. Chrissy mentioned that Tulsi Gabbard said that only the president can determine what imminent means. Yes, what an imminent threat is.
You can't spell imminent.
Trump has said throughout the last 20 years that he knows more than any other expert, that he knows more than the generals, he knows more about terrorism, he knows more about the economy, he knows more about everything, and he doesn't. The president does not make unilateral decisions like this. They consult his cabinet, his experts, they bring in academics, they bring in military experts, and they discuss it, and then they make a decision. But he gets advice from other people. He doesn't give advice. He doesn't make a decision because he had a feeling in his, Burger King, McDonald's filled gut.
Feel it in my bones.
No, that's not how it works. And so I am absolutely terrified for the safety of this country, because I knew that he's a fraud. I know that, and people think I don't suffer from Trump deranged syndrome. I suffer from intelligence. I'm smart enough to see through all of that mess.
It's terminal.
Yeah. And so, I don't. Yeah. So I think we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with the term kakistocracy?
I am. That is when you're basically run by crooks and thieves. Yes.
When the stupidest, least competent, least qualified people are in charge. Kakistocracy. It starts with a K, and it is a word that we didn't need to know 10 years ago, but here we are.
Right. Well,
yeah.
We're living it. We're certainly proving. Giving a illustration of what this means. It is the United States of America is now like, there's a picture of us and the Trump administration next to kakistocracy in the dictionary. So I want to sort of stay on the Iran thread and tug at a little different thing here. So, while the U.S. and Israel are sparring over the war's objectives, Israel did not wait for Trump's approval on Wednesday, striking the South Pars natural gas field, the world's largest and Iran's primary domestic energy source, setting off a wave of Iranian retaliation across the Gulf. They hit United Arab Emirates ports and the Dubai airport, attacked the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, and struck energy facilities in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. The attack on Qatar's Ras Laffan liquefied natural gas facility was particularly devastating, damaging 17% of Qatar's LNG export capacity and could cost an estimated $20 billion in annual revenue, while threatening supplies to Europe and Asia for the next 3 to 5 years. The U.S. and Israel then responded by hitting the Natanz nuclear facility in Iran. Meanwhile, Trump has been unable to rally NATO allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. Eric alluded to this. Most rejected his calls outright, insisting this is not their war. Now, 7 U.S. allies offered a political statement of support for a Strait of Hormuz coalition. Of course, zero actual commitment of military resources. Trump waived the Jones Act for 60 days in an attempt to stabilize oil markets by freeing up international tankers to carry fuel between U.S. ports, but that's just a Band-Aid on the much bigger problem as regional energy infrastructure crumbles and global supplies face disruption. So now, with allies refusing to get involved militarily, Trump is considering putting American boots on the ground to seize Kharg Island, through which nearly all of Iran's oil exports flow, potentially choking off their energy supplies entirely in an effort to force the Strait of Hormuz open. Chrissy, just brilliant job we've done here as a world basing our entire economy on oil, through which 20% of it, the world's supply, has to pass through this politically fraught body of water.
Yeah. Well, Eric put it perfectly. Donald Trump is not somebody with any kind of expertise in anything other than scamming and harming children. This is somebody who has failed upward their entire life and has, by the grace of whatever and money, just been given advice and told what to do pretty consistently throughout his life. And so this just feels like another piece of something that somebody else told him to do, and that he did not or could not foresee any immediate or even long-term consequences of that, like the supply chain disruption on its own. It's not even about the physical oil not being able to come out of the region. The supply chain disruption alone has been just absolutely detrimental to, specifically, I'm thinking specifically like the Indiana farmers and who are having trouble getting their fertilizer, prices for their fertilizer now. And now they're even having to consider, do we even abandon corn? We're in Indiana and our farmers are talking about, do we abandon our corn crops entirely because we cannot get enough nitrogen for our soil? This is just feeds into a larger picture of people being Republicans in particular, being incredibly short-sighted about their goals and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And, they're getting bad advice from all directions, and it's impacting the people that they swore up and down they were here to protect and make their lives better. And now all of these farmers who voted for Trump turned around and their pockets are hurting. And, and beyond that, just the energy aspect of it all. For the last 20-25 years, the Republican stranglehold on our state house government has prevented any real development into any sort of renewable or sustainable energy. So we are beholden to these natural gas companies, to running fossil fuels in our vehicles, because we haven't made the investments in any kind of infrastructure to move beyond that. And so while we are digging the hole, and we just went and got a bigger shovel.
Eric, now I'm not quite old enough to remember this, but I'm aware at least that, we had an energy crisis in the 1970s based on our inability to, securely get foreign oil to us. Now, the United States has certainly developed its domestic supply since then, where we're actually the world's largest oil producer, but still it's a globally traded commodity, and any disruption to the supply is going to affect prices worldwide. In response to that crisis in the 70s, the Carter administration was, trying to put things in place then that would have benefited us long term. If we would have stayed on that path, this might not even be relevant. We wouldn't even need to be worrying about the Gulf and their oil reserves, because we would be off of the junk. And I use that term precisely because it's like we're addicted to this stuff, especially when the pusher, the oil lobby, has been in control of the Republican Party for the last, forever.
Yes. So I was there, right, in the 70s. I remember I was in high school, and I remember the long line.
84 years ago.
Why when I was your age? It was. I remember in high school there were long gas lines at the gas stations, and it was horrendous, and the prices were through the roof. And yes, Jimmy Carter, who people say was not a great president, but who I would argue is one of the greatest Americans ever. He did put into motion alternate energy opportunities. I think Obama continued to do that. The intelligent presidents have done that all along. And then we get a new, Trump comes back into office. He says that climate change is a hoax, that, alternate energy is a scam, and we need to rely on oil and coal and all of these things that are destroying the earth and affecting all these things. And then he goes into a war and cuts off 20% of the oil supply. So it just makes no sense. If you really think that all this other stuff is a scam, then why would you cut off the oil supply? Or at least we're going to attack Iran. The oil might be disrupted. We do need to keep doing some alternate energy stuff just in case. And our oil supply reserves, which we have just been holding on to, is in case of an emergency. So when we do run out of oil, but we haven't transitioned into alternate energy, we still have the biggest reserve in the world, so we can still operate. Now we're using our reserves. We don't know how long that's going to last. I just think that this administration is really setting us up for failure, and I have no idea what's to come. But I am not confident that they're smart, that they're thinking through this. And I have mentioned before, I do think that Donald Trump does not love America. He loves what America can do for him. Every decision he makes is based on what is he going to get out of it. When he goes to a visit to the UK, it's to check on his golf course in Scotland. When he goes on this tour of of the Middle East. It's to make deals for his company through his sons and his son-in-law. Everything he does is based on what is he going to get out of it. And who was in his ear at the last moment. And he'll change his mind in a second if the last person he talks to offers him more, knows how to compliment him in the right way. And that's just not someone we want in a leadership position, certainly not someone to be the most powerful president that we've ever had, based on firing all the inspector generals, all the people who were smart and who could keep him in check and who would make sure he made the right decisions, like in his first administration. And so now here we are. All of the promises of not going to war, of lowering prices. And I bet they didn't know that how large a percentage of fertilizer came through the Strait of Hormuz for our farmers. So he already, raised tariffs, so that damaged the farmers. Then he gave, $20 billion to Argentina. Mm-hmm. and then bought all their beef, so that would also put our beef, farms, cattlers and ranchers out of business or affect them. Then we give billions to our farmers, and now the farmers can't get fertilizer. So even if they have this money, they still can't buy fertilizer. So every decision, he just makes a decision on a whim and not looking strategically at the overall pictures. And then what worked in Venezuela, that'll work in Iran. Oh my gosh, completely different. And now he wants Cuba, and he's doing all these things all over the place. In the meantime, I don't think they're looking at what's going on around the world. China is building up, military around Taiwan that I haven't even heard on the news, but I've seen online. And so I think Russia will be emboldened. China will be emboldened. And I think that this is just going to have domino effects in a negative way.
Yeah, just not well thought out all around. And you mentioned the farmers, and we're going to pivot to that here in just a second. Yeah. But like the people who went 10 toes down for Trump, rural voters, big Trump constituency. Indiana here went for Trump overwhelmingly, and now we're paying the price. And I want to look at the Indiana angle of this whole thing. And, it's getting harder and harder to separate what's going on over there from how it directly affects us here at home. As Chrissy mentioned, the Pentagon is requesting over $200 billion to fund the Iran war, money that could build things here instead of destroying things there. While the Federal Reserve warned this week that inflation isn't coming down as hoped. Well, of course it hasn't. Energy costs percolate through the entire economy. Like we were just talking about, fertilizer prices are skyrocketing just before Indiana's spring planting season. Food prices were jumping in February before the war even started. That's only going to get worse. And fuel costs are crushing nonprofits and schools and families, obviously, at the pump. Meanwhile, here in Indiana, investor-owned utilities are collecting record profits as household bills soar. Indianapolis ranks third in the nation for foreclosures, yet the city just approved a massive data center that will only increase demand on an already strained electrical grid. Evansville ranked fourth in that foreclosure ranking, while their neighbors across the river in Henderson, Kentucky this week are voting to block wind energy projects that could help both communities and strengthen the entire grid, all over aesthetics, the way things look. So, Chrissy, we were talking about this. Energy costs ripple through everything, and Hoosiers are going to pay the price in more ways than one, aren't we?
And it's just so interesting to me because we talk about we don't have a funding problem. We have a priorities problem because we talk about, well, we don't have the money for Medicaid, Medicare subsidies. We don't have the money for SNAP. We don't have the money to give free meals to kids in schools, but we have the money and the resources to make sure we put the 10 commandments in every classroom, to make sure that we are kicking the 15 trans athletes in the entire state off of their school teams, to make sure that we are in the pockets of the utility companies and blocking any kind of investment in renewable energy. Meanwhile, customers. They're allowed to raise their prices. We get charged for projects that aren't even completed yet. So the financial risk of those projects then gets shifted to the customer. And then we are just in the cudgels of this monopoly because we have literally no other options unless you're one of the select few who have the resources to put solar panels on your house or to invest in some kind of alternative energy out of your own pocket. Here locally, we do have a number of nonprofits that offer rebates for those type of things, but it's not anywhere near to scale what we would need to do to statewide to see any kind of real difference. You know, we have money to go after public educators and all of these horrible things, but we just don't seem to have the money to help anybody. That just seems to be the running theme for the last 20 years of our state house politics. You know, we want to make sure that our local law enforcement are working with ICE, and you know, we want to encourage them to violate people's Fourth Amendment rights, which we are very lucky down here in Monroe County with our sheriff Ruben Marte is resisting working for ICE and refusing to violate people's constitutional Fourth Amendment rights and hold people once they have been released, because here in Monroe County we believe in the Constitution, and our sheriff took an oath to that and not to Todd Rokita. So I forget what the initial question was. I'm so sorry.
No, that's good.
Well, you're doing great.
Eric, this whole thing, like so much of Trump's pitch during the election was, oh, we're going to bring down gas prices, which number one, it's a selfish and stupid and short-sighted way to look at anything. Frankly, our gas prices even now are still too low in terms of what compared to what they are worldwide and where they need to be to encourage folks to adopt alternative energy sources. But even then, fine. If you want to, take that at face value, people do need, our bills are a concern, right? People are worried about costs, and gas is a major component in that, and it does percolate through the entire economy. But all that's shot out the window now, right? That's like the one thing Trump had to offer. Well, he just blew a hole in his entire argument, didn't he?
Yeah, I think the word for the last 20 years, and at least with Trump's administrations, it's just hypocrisy. Like they say one thing and do the exact opposite. He wants the Nobel Peace Prize. He lobbied for the Nobel Peace Prize. He attacked people for not giving him a Nobel Peace Prize. He took the Nobel Peace Prize from someone who earned it. So he has one, and then he attacks Venezuela, attacks Iran, talking about going after Cuba. There's nothing peaceful about him. They changed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. Like, there's nothing peaceful about just the hypocrisy. I will stop wars on day one. We're over a year now, and no wars have stopped. He claims 8 have, but I'm not sure which ones those are. He's attacked 7 countries in the first year of his term, including Nigeria. And like what? It just
we don't even talk about that one. It's like there's so much else going on. It's just that how do you keep up? It's like drinking from a fire hose. I've used that metaphor constantly before. Yes. Everything, everywhere, all at once. And
that's Bannon. His first name just jumped out of my head, but his former advisor,
Steve Bannon, flood the zone.
Bannon said, just keep doing stuff. They won't be able to keep up with it. We just keep making changes and doing anything that we want to do, and they'll never be able to keep up with it. But guess who else can't keep up with it? Them. Their own administration does so much stuff that they can't keep up with it. They can't manage it. The one thing Trump is brilliant at is critiquing other people, mostly through lies. But when he's on the outside, even when he's not president, he's just constantly in the media. They're doing this, they're doing this. I would have done this. That's the dumbest thing ever. That's the worst deal ever made. Then he gets in office and he does 10 times worse. He can, but he can't govern. All he can do is critique, and gets furious when people critique him. And then tries to silence critics and get TV comedians kicked off of the air and all of those things. So hypocrisy is his middle name.
So, Chrissy, I guess I want to bring this back home here to Indiana, and we talked about how popular Trump was here, how he won here in a landslide, how we have this MAGA supermajority, and is this really hitting folks in the pocketbook going to be the thing that finally gets the fever to break, do you think, at least here in Indiana?
It's so hard to say, and I'm hesitant to treat MAGA as a monolith because I mean for a multitude of reasons, but they all have seemed to at some point drawn a line in the sand somewhere, and then this guy has crossed it, and so we've drawn a new line, and now we've drawn a new line. And with the Epstein files, we thought, okay, people raping children, this is the line that we all say this is not okay. Okay, well, some of you all were still willing to cross that line and support this man. So I genuinely believe that there is, and I believe it is a small faction of our population that they are with Trump. There is nothing he can do or say to ever lose their support, and they are with him in lockstep. I believe that is a very small portion of people. One thing that I think is important to acknowledge, especially for people who triple trumped and voted for him 3 times, pride is an extremely powerful emotion. And in order to admit that you no longer agree with this man and to back off on your support, you will have to admit that you had been duped, that you had been fooled. And for a lot of people, their pride will prevent them from doing that till their dying breath. And I'll be the first to admit that when he got elected and his policies started to impact people who voted for him, I was very much of the, well, fuck around and find out. And it was very easy to sit in that and be like, well, you know, me and my moral superiority, I told you not to do this and look what happened. Okay, well, these are still people in my community. I still genuinely care about them at the end of the day. And if I am going to continue living, I have to believe that some of these people can be reached. And as hard as it is, it's going to be incumbent on us to not cut people out of our lives entirely because they support Donald Trump or because they believe, you know, one conspiracy theory or something else. Because what happens then is people retreat into their echo chambers, and the environment that they're in is so insular, and everything that they're hearing is only agreeing with them, and they are no longer exposed to any kind of viewpoint that challenges their world assumption, especially if it's somebody in your family or your neighborhood or community or somebody who respects you, you know, on at least on face value. We cannot lose even those tangential connections, because those, I think, are those kinds of conversation are really going to move the needle for people.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess let's stay in Indiana and turn the corner and talk about an area where you might not think, but like we said, rising fuel prices percolate through the entire economy, and one of the places where this will hit Hoosiers hardest is school districts, right? Transportation budgets are a massive part of school spending, and they're about to get squeezed even harder. Already, Indianapolis public schools are announcing major cuts as deficits loom there, eliminating pre-K programs, consolidating special education and arts, laying off teachers. But while schools struggle to find actual learning and development young people as full human beings, right? The state's priorities tell a different story. Governor Braun is pushing a $1 billion agriculture and life sciences initiative focused on workforce development, right? Essentially telling kids their purpose is to feed the capitalist machine, to be a cog in the system. Meanwhile, child care centers are closing statewide due to voucher cuts. Ivy Tech's governance is being written to double down on workforce training over general education, and a new report shows Hoosier boys and young men are falling behind, struggling with loneliness, despair, and anger. Indiana's education system isn't preparing citizens, it's preparing workers, and it's failing even at that, you know? So I guess, Eric, I want to start with you here. I mean, obviously, first of all, just the fuel factor and education and transportation, it's a major portion of school budgets, and just to get kids in the building, they're going to have to cut elsewhere if these gas prices keep going up, right?
Absolutely. And again, that's the not the strategic overview of everything. They're not seeing how their policies have much broader effects. So yes, schools will have more expenses. even food, even to feed the kids, even the kids who pay for food, they're going to have to pay more, let alone the kids that are no longer supported and won't be able to eat. So all of these little decisions, but not little decisions, all these decisions are having broad, horrific effects within the state. And I also think that another policy that we keep doing, and it happens more in urban schools. I don't know of any rural schools that takes place, but if a school has like 60% capacity, they'll shut it down and then they'll sell the building to private investors for like $1, and then they open charter schools, and now they're getting charter schools, giving them the ability to tap into tax dollars. So now the school has reopened that has 20% of the capacity, but still using our tax dollars. And then all the people that were displaced out of that school are now being, bused other places, which cost more for gas. They need more buses. It's more complex. So all of these things, and it's an ideological problem. They don't like public schools, so they want to use tax dollars for religious schools, for conservative schools, and it's having adverse effects.
And Chrissy, boy, speaking of those vouchers that Eric brought up, it'd sure be nice to have that extra $500 million that program costs to offset some of these increased costs that our school districts are going to face. But even just beyond that, once you get the kids into the school, we're cutting programs left and right. I mean, we're starving our public schools of resources while the state, it seems, is investing into turning our children into economic units. We didn't even mention the recent rollback of child labor standards, and that they're completely cutting reporting of child labor violations. I mean, what message does that send about what we actually value in our state?
It sends a message that we value people who can afford a private education, and that if you can afford it, then you deserve to have one. One big misconception about the vouchers is that if you get a voucher and you, regardless of your socioeconomic status, let's say you get a voucher to this private school, you get to go to that school. Not true. Those private schools still have a rigorous admit process, and there is a pretty good chance that you aren't going to get in unless you maybe already have a legacy there, or your family has made considerable donations, or other considerations like that. But then what happens? Then they've already turned around and shut down your public school, and now you're being bused a half a county away. And like Eric was saying, that just adds to those higher and higher costs. What's happening with the Department of Education is indicative of what Republicans are trying to do with our government as a whole. If you look at these people, these Republicans in power, they tell you that government and public education is broken. So they get into these positions of government and public education, and they break it so that they can continue their narrative of, look how broken this is. The only option now is to fully fund the private schools that my friends and colleagues are going to benefit from. And that's just that's their playbook. They want to prove that things are broken, so they get in there and they break it, and they turn around and try to privatize things and profit off of it themselves. It's the oldest play in the book.
Mm-hmm. It's the Eric Andre meme. Like, why would public schools do this?
Yeah. Or Tim Robinson in the hot dog costume, where there was a meme the other day where it was the Indiana Republicans trying to figure out why our utility bills are so high, and he's like, "We're trying to figure out who did this." My guy,
right?
The mirror is
learned
right
it by watching you. I guess we'll just mix all of our pop culture references together, right? That one might be a little bit before your time, Chrissy, but I know Eric gets that reference, right?
Yes.
So, and we didn't even really touch on the effects this have on kids' mental health to be raised in these schools that are not treating them as full people. They're grooming them to be economic units, and it's particularly harmful to young boys and men, as we saw from that study that was released this week. And instead of investing in education and building a real broad tax base upon which to fund our state, Indiana is instead relying on cheap tricks like housing ICE detainees to make up the difference. profiting to the tune of $3.86 million in November alone, housing detainees for the federal government. But that money, of course, comes at a cost far greater than any federal payment. Those angry young men we talked about, groomed by a state education system that treats them as cogs in a machine rather than human beings, are being funneled into the war machine that we talked about at the top of the show, or careers as things like ICE agents, enforcing a system built on brutality. And this week, more horror in that department. We learned of an Afghan asylum seeker who fought alongside U.S. forces for over a decade, dying within 24 hours of ICE detention in Dallas. A 19-year-old Mexican teenager who died in ICE custody. This was ruled a presumed suicide. Sure, it was. And a Spanish language reporter covering ICE actions was arrested without a valid warrant. The government arguing in court that the First Amendment may not even apply to immigrants. Meanwhile, the guy who led brutal ICE raids in Minnesota, former Border Patrol Commander Gregory Bovino, announced he is retiring, apparently to avoid internal investigations into his deportation tactics. Speaking of deplorable officials in that department, outgoing DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and her, let's just say, close aide, Corey Lewandowski, who allegedly wielded massive power at the agency as her de facto chief of staff, have both left their posts amid corruption allegations, with Lewandowski accused of shaking down contractors for bribes. Now, Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin, Trump's pick to replace Noem, this week faced contentious confirmation hearing where Kentucky Senator Rand Paul questioned his fitness for the job. And if you got Rand Paul questioning your fitness for the job, you're in trouble, right? And through all of this, at the other end of the Department of Homeland Security, Transportation Safety Administration workers are going unpaid while ICE operates fully funded in the midst of a partial government shutdown. ICE and Border Patrol were fully funded to the tune of tens of billions of dollars in last year's one big stupid bill. But TSA workers at the airports are going unpaid. We're seeing things really start to back up there, and now Trump is threatening to send ICE agents to the airports to do their job for him. Chrissy, hope you don't plan on flying anytime soon. It's already bad enough to go through the airport and get the pat down. You certainly don't want an angry ICE agent being the one giving that to you.
Yeah, no, I will not be getting on a plane until that man is no longer in charge of the FAA. That's for sure. But this goes back to just the larger, like what we've been talking about this whole time. Chaos makes us unsafe inherently. And all of the resources and all of the money and everything that's being diverted to ICE to terrorize our immigrant community is money not being spent on our actual defenses that we're going to need. And if our shields are down and we're out there acting like assholes and attacking not only our adversaries, but our allies too, I mean, this just seems like a prime opportunity for somebody to take advantage of something like that. All of this chaos and all of this jockeying for position is only helping strengthen China, and it's helping strengthen Russia right now. And Trump portrays this image of strength, but he's just an idiot. And that's where we are. And I say the exact same about Markwayne Mullin. He tried to fight Sean O'Brien, the president of the Teamsters, during a Senate hearing. Wild. I just don't know that this is the type of person or type of temperament that we want to have in this job.
Yeah,
what did Trump say, right, when he was talking about his, I only hire the best people. Really? I mean, like we've seen that he hired Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski and what they were up to. By the way. But yeah, now Markwayne Mullin, not exactly the sharpest tool in the Senate for sure, huh, Eric?
Still a tool.
He's also the least educated in the Senate. He's the only one without a bachelor's degree. He has an associate's degree in construction management or something like that, an associate's degree. And we're not, people's educational attainment is whatever works for them. But when you're a senator and then put in charge of the largest government, agency, that that's a problem.
Well, yeah, no, listen, Eric, I agree. And listen, yeah, like you said, we don't want to look down our noses on people that
Yeah,
don't
not at
have a
all.
college education. I frankly think we need more people in representative government who didn't go to college or at least have more diverse backgrounds. But
True.
I mean, listen, regardless of his degree or his qualifications, Mark Wayne Mullen is an idiot.
Correct, and he's not qualified for the post that they're putting him in. Yeah, absolutely. But he does have the one salient qualification, and that is loyalty to Trump. And that's why he has the job.
Yeah. Well, so Chrissy, I want to ask, we talk about this, the abolish ICE talking point, right? And I don't know. Obviously, Mullen replacing Noam with Mullen is, putting new lipstick on the same pig. But, this might go beyond the abolish ICE versus reform ICE debate. This is a sign of deeper rot. I think it goes beyond the agency self. It is systemic. It is cultural. This is a sign that America is sick, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's like I keep saying, it's endemic of a larger issue, that this is just sort of the pattern of chaos that we are. I think anybody who's paying attention is trying to not get accustomed to. We cannot let this become the new normal. We have to stay hyper vigilant. I know that it is exhausting to be upset all of the time, but that is what is going to keep us safe. Is staying vigilant and taking care of each other. And if we saw, like, from talking to the organizers that I know out of Minneapolis, that what ICE did in those communities, not only the horrible things that they did to the people in those communities, but the communities themselves are more resilient now and are strengthening themselves because of what they've had to go through. People talk about they know their neighbors better now. They have a stronger support network. They are more connected with other people in their community because they've had to be. And that's sort of what we're seeing here too. We're not seeing the same dragnet style ICE operations here in Indiana. It's been much more selective, picking up, folks individually. But we have seen that push from our community to really want to increase our knowledge and find ways to protect each other and keep each other safe. And that is what is giving me hope, because we know that the government is not going to come in and help us. Nobody is coming to save us. It's going to be incumbent on us to protect ourselves and to protect our neighbors. And I think that is where folks' efforts can be best spent right now, because you can watch the news, you can scroll on Facebook, you can read the comments, you can do all of this stuff, but you are going to feel hopeless and you're going to feel powerless. And there is always something you can do today, right now, in your community that will make the world look more like the world that you want to live in. Like, obviously, you can't call up Donald Trump or Pete Hegseth and pull us out of Iran, but you can do something in our community to make sure that your neighbors are more safe, to make sure that people are aware of their rights and resources that are available to them. And I think that is going to be, it's going to be us. There's nobody's coming to save us. And I think the sooner people realize that and take ownership of our situation, because we're so individualistic here and such isolationists, and that was really exacerbated by COVID, when we told everyone, do this the problem with the mask is we told it you're to protect other people. We should have told people it was to protect themselves and their families, and then they would have probably complied more. But
yeah, and to sort of to what you said, Chrissy, you're talking about the people coming together, that the ICE has really highlighted the attacks on our communities, and it's sort of pooling, bringing people closer to their neighbors and whatnot. I sort of worry with folks like Bovino out and Noam out and their over the top antics, and replacing it with, maybe a more of a glossy sheen, if you can call Mark Wayne Mullen that it's going to let people get complacent, and this stuff is still going to take place, but more under our nose. Right, Eric?
Right. I can't recall his name. I was trying to look it up real quick, but there was a whistleblower who was involved in training of ICE agents, and he mentioned that they cut down the number of already minimal hours to become an ICE agent. You get like a $50,000 signing bonus, and then you get paid over $100K to be an ICE agent. So A lot of people are doing it, but they'll only accept certain people, right? And then they cut down the amount of training, so they're literally being trained not to follow the Constitution. And when they do interview people, like during what is it called, like scenarios in training, people would shoot or use pepper spray on the the populations, and they're like, well, why did you make that decision? It's like, well, that's what we saw in Minnesota or somewhere else. That's how ICE agents do it. So these are people training to be ICE agents that are taking cues from the wrong ICE agents that are already in the field and not being trained properly. And we knew that. We knew they were not being trained properly. The way they reach for their guns or they drop their guns and all the stuff that they're doing in the public and the way they treat people and pushing old people around and body slamming women, all of those things, that's not proper training, right? And that does defy our legal rights and constitutional rights. So that's a problem. Also, where they get some of these ICE agents, a lot of them were involved in the insurrection of, January 6th.
January 6th, yeah. Not exactly hiring the best people, are we?
The best people for what they want is to terrorize people of color and women and liberals and Democrats, because again, they're not sending ICE agents to Republican controlled cities, only Democratic controlled cities. So all of this is, again, it's intentional, but it's also erratic, chaotic, and we want the dangerous criminal illegal immigrants out of the country. We don't want gang members, but the people who have been here 30 years, even if they're undocumented, they're paying taxes, they have businesses, they're putting into the community, they hold leadership positions. They're not hurting, they're helping. And they've deported so many people that crops, sometimes migrant workers our crops are dying in the field. The amount of stuff that is wasted, the amount of money that has gone to waste because of their policies is absolutely ridiculous. If we could add up all of their mistakes and put a price tag on it, it would be like the amount that they're about to try to spend in Iran.
At
Millions.
least, at least, for sure. And so,
Hundreds
and
of
you know,
billions.
you sort of hit at this, Eric, and the part of the reason that we're sold this idea that ICE is even necessary. Like, number one, it's a small percentage of the people they're actually arresting are like, violent criminals or even have any criminal record, some minor thing, right? It's very minuscule, the amount of, criminal violent offenders that are in this country. Most people are good, hardworking people who are just coming here to escape the crappy situation in their home country, which was oftentimes caused by us, and that's where I want to turn next. And we've sort of got at this a couple times already. What we're sold this idea that we need this tough immigration enforcement, largely because the United States has destabilized its neighbors. And here's what that looks like this week. On Monday, Cuba plunged into total darkness, an island-wide blackout affecting 11 million people. That's the third time in 4 months. And I think there was another one yesterday as I was writing this script that I didn't get to put in. So this is after the Trump administration cut off Venezuelan oil shipments after they black-bagged President Nicolas Maduro in January and took control of Venezuela's oil industry. Now, Trump has since told reporters he could do anything I want with Cuba, whether he frees it or takes it. And desperate to appease Washington and avoid that scenario, Cuba has begun releasing political prisoners and allowing the diaspora to invest and own businesses on the island. Meanwhile, the DEA here in our country designated Colombian President Gustavo Petro a priority target over alleged drug trafficking ties, setting up another potential Maduro-style scenario where a left-wing leader faces U.S. prosecution on unproven charges. Now, let's pivot to the other side of the world and look at Asia. The Iran war has thrown Trump's planned trip to China in doubt. Then this week, Trump met Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at the Oval Office, and he made a Pearl Harbor joke comparing U.S. surprise attacks on Iran to Japan's 1941 attack on Hawaii. Takaichi's eyes widened, as one might expect. You'd think she'd expect just about anything going in to see this guy at this point. But speaking of sneak attacks, though, it turns out Denmark was prepared for one by the United States. Danish broadcaster DR this week revealed that back in January, Denmark secretly deployed troops to Greenland with live ammunition, supplies of extra blood, and explosives to blow up runways to deny the U.S. access in case of invasion. A Danish defense source saying, we have not been in such a situation since April of 1940. The trigger, of course, was the U.S. military action in Venezuela, capturing Maduro. Denmark brought in France, Germany, Sweden, Norway, and others to show they were serious. Now, Trump has since backed off the Greenland rhetoric, but the troops there remain. Chrissy, you can sort of address this Latin American angle if you would like. Decades of U.S. destabilization created the very immigration crisis that we now claim ICE to solve. And then I'll ask Eric about the Greenland situation, or maybe you'd like to talk about Trump's behavior in the Oval Office. It is a grab bag of trash. Just dig in.
It's all bad. So this is somebody who learned how to be a president from watching movies and TV and what he thinks how he thinks a president should behave. This is not somebody who learned how to govern by actual experience governing or working with people or coming to agreements with people. This is, as we've said, somebody who is very easily swayed by whoever was the last person to have his ear. And so if we know that there is a strong Cuban community down in Miami where he spends a lot of time, and a lot of them have very strong opinions on U.S.-Cuban relations. And so it's very likely that he had somebody who is very important to him personally give him this, this intel and tell him that this is the correct way to go. But like you said, this speaks to a larger problem. We complain about people coming to this country to escape conditions that it is more likely than not we created in their country, and then we want to know, why don't you stay and make things better? What are you talking about? So it just, why would anybody trust the United States is my question right now. We go back on our word. We hurt anyone who even offers to try to help us. We're so isolationist, and we've lost any shred of credibility that we have had on the world stage.
Yeah, well, and Eric, I guess Chrissy sets you up very nicely to talk about this, because we have our own allies. We have our own NATO allies preparing for invasion of their territory that they've held on to for hundreds and hundreds of years. And not to mention, it's beyond the NATO allies. Look how we treat our Asian allies when they come visit. It boggles the mind, man.
Right. And NATO is an organization designed for defense, not for aggression. And so that's why NATO isn't, that's just another reason NATO is not all involved in the Iran conflict at the moment. They're not rushing to open the Strait of Hormuz, because it's not their preview. It's not what they're supposed to do. It's not in their constitution or bylaws. So, but yeah, just the absolute lack of decorum and common sense and politeness of all the countries in the world. I think Japan is one of the most in courteousness and politeness. Their culture is based on that. Mm-hmm. And to have to sit in front of the entire world and have Trump make a joke about World War II. Now, nobody knows surprises more than Japan. I mean, you didn't tell us about, Pearl Harbor. Like, what? Absolute. If Biden would have said that, he's crazy. He's kick him out now, and hospitalize him, put him in a mental institute. And Trump has proven over and over and over again he is mentally unstable. Like, he does have mental illness, not only the egocentricness, all of it. He and it's declining. They asked him a question about something, and he notices how beautiful the non-existing Construction is going on at the White House. I mean, it's halted. There's no construction going on. But he's like, this is beautiful. Well, it's going to be beautiful. Like, and it avoids the question. Like, he is in mental decline. So yes, all of that. And I'll just tie it back to Iran. In the 1940s, Iran had a democratically elected leader. That leader decided that he would kick out the British oil companies and make their oil owned by the state. That would give money back to infrastructure, to the people, and start building a democratic society. England didn't like that they were getting kicked out and would lose all that money. They went to the U.S. for help. The U.S. sent in the CIA. They overthrew the government, put in the Shah. Years later, the Shah was horrible for some people. It depends what side you're on. Then the Shah was overthrown by the Ayatollah Khomeini, and here we are now. So a lot of the problems that we face around the world are actually because of what we've done around the world. I remember during 9/11 when Bush 2 said they hate our freedom. They don't hate our freedom. They don't care what we do here. They care what we do there. Right? They don't care what we're doing here. They're not, fighting against our Hollywood or our liberal society. They just want to run their lives, and that's my perspective anyway. So.
Oh no, 100%. I totally agree. So I got to move on to our next story here. Yes. And this, so it turns out that Denmark's instincts regarding Greenland were confirmed with actual academic data and rigor this week by the VDEM Institute at Gothenburg University in Sweden, one of the world's most credible democracy watchdogs, who released a damning report. The United States is hurtling toward autocracy faster than Hungary under Viktor Orban or Turkey under Recep Tayyip Erdogan. We may not be as far along as they are, but we're catching up and on pace to surpass them. The evidence is mounting. 9 protesters attending demonstration outside an ICE facility were convicted this week of material support for terrorism for opposing Trump's immigration crackdown, a precedent that means anyone opposing the regime can be labeled an Antifa terrorist. Trump's handpicked Kennedy Center board voted to shut down the storied performing arts institution for 2 years, consolidating control over American cultural institutions. The Voice of America, once an independent news organization, faced dismantling when Trump appointee Carrie Lake attempted to purge over 1,000 staffers. Now, moves a federal judge ruled illegal this week, but Trump's assault on independent media didn't stop there. The president threatened to bring treason charges against news outlets for unflattering coverage of his Iran war, while FCC Chair Brendan Carr threatened to revoke broadcast licenses of stations that don't fall in line. Meanwhile, the FCC approved a merger between Nexstar and Tegna, 2 giants in local TV station ownership, allowing a single company to control television stations reaching nearly 80% of American households. This is a clear waiver of antitrust law. The Nexstar CEO thanked Trump as the DOJ rubber-stamped this $3.5 billion deal, along with recent acquisitions of CBS and TikTok and soon CNN and Warner Brothers by the Trump-aligned Ellison family. It seems we have a burgeoning state media apparatus being built in front of our eyes. Chrissy, you ready to call it fascism yet?
I've been calling it that for the record. The United States, we talk about our most, what is our most closely held value, right? It's freedom. Well, freedom for who? And one reason that I think a lot of people have trouble squaring the circle of calling a spade and saying this is fascism is because it doesn't look the way that it doesn't present through the very narrow lens which we have been taught to view it.
There's no death camps yet.
Yeah, there's no death camps, but there's also not white Christian men being picked up off of the streets and hauled off en masse. And people aren't seeing people that they identify with being impacted. So it's very easy for them to dismiss it and say, well, those kinds of things don't happen here. They're not happening to you specifically yet, but they are happening here, and we have to be very honest about who we want freedom for in this country. And it has become abundantly clear that this administration wants freedom for Christian, white, rich, land owning men. That's who they care about. That's who their policies prioritize, and that is who they want freedom to be for. And that is why we see such pushback on anything that is counter to that in the slightest. And I know Eric can speak to this even better, but here at IU, we had a whole list of words that you're not allowed to use anymore. Some women was on the list of words, like diverse. Like this absolute insanity to me. And as long as we continue to kneecap our publicly available information, the importance of independent media is going to become even more important. But like we said, Steve Bannon and this administration, their whole thing is flood the zone, overwhelm people. We know that the mainstream media has the attention span of a gnat. At 24 hours, like that is how Trump operates. It's just one crisis at a time, just got to make it through this news cycle to the next thing that he fucked up that we're going to go talk about, just get by, just get to the next thing. And if we don't have independent media really holding people's feet to the fire, and I mean, even for God's sake, what's his name? Doug Ducey pushed back on Trump and asked a clarifying question, for God's sake. I'm like, if that's what we got, that's our allies in the press pool right now. I mean, God help us. But independent media, like obviously Who's Left, I pay a lot of attention to the folks from Crooked Media, the former staff writers from the Obama era, the folks out of Midas Touch, those kinds of things, and very hyper local journalism as well. We're super lucky here in Bloomington to have like the B Square Bulletin, and we have a journalist who gets the FOIA requests and sits through all the meetings and reads all the minutes and really gives us good information. But it's such a privilege to have that too. The majority of people don't have the capacity to pay attention to local politics, especially, and they feel so overwhelmed by national politics that they just shut down and they don't engage at all. And before I was in party leadership, during elections, I would often have signs out in front of my yard promoting specific candidates before the election. And my neighbors, who they have the ability to get up, get their kids off to school, go work all day, come home, feed their family, and that's their bandwidth. If before it's time for an election, they will come down to my yard, look at the signs in my yard and say, okay, we know Chrissy, she's paying attention, she's engaged, we trust her. These are the people that we could vote for. And if we have more people like that, those liaisons in our community, then it becomes less burdensome for the individual to focus and pay attention to everything, because it becomes so overwhelming.
And Eric, yeah, Chrissy talked about we've got B Square Bulletin and the Bloomingtonian here. We got a couple really good independent journalists, but boy, that's putting a lot on the shoulders of a few people. I know I'm getting overwhelmed trying to do what we're doing here sometimes, and it's a lot to ask of individuals. With journalism needs institutional support, and we're selling all that off. We've seen it in short order, with CBS coming under the Ellison umbrella and TikTok now. That algorithm has changed a lot since the change in ownership.
Absolutely.
CNN's going to come under their umbrella as well. There was the pressure put on ABC and Jimmy Kimmel. They fortunately pushed back there, but how much can some of these media companies withstand?
Colbert is still fired.
Yeah. And then at the local level, it might be even more concerning. Like with this Nexstar Tegna merger, you've already got Sinclair, which is a right-wing outlet that has major ownership stakes all in these little stations all over the country. That's where a lot of people are getting their local news. And so, we've got the national news, like Chrissy said, kind of overwhelming everything. But then when you step down to the next level, it's hard to get truth there. And it always, the cliche is if it bleeds, it leads. And that's sort of always been the case. But the viewpoint of the local news is important as well. And it seems to like reinforce stereotypes a lot, especially, quote, inner city crime, right?
Yes. Yeah, all of that. So and one thing we didn't mention, at least I don't think I heard, but defunding PBS and NPR, because
How
NPR
about
and
that?
they have local local news stories as well as national. Pete Hegseth requiring the media to sign, a document stating that they will not report negatively on, the Department of War. Otherwise, and if you don't sign it, then you can't come into their news briefings.
They
So
took over Stars and Stripes as well. That was a independent
yes,
publication within the Department of Defense that they also took over. Yeah,
that they think has a liberal slant, but it just has it's just reporting. Right. So
what did Colbert say once, that the truth has a liberal bias or something? Yeah.
I didn't hear him say that, but yes, that's brilliant and hilarious and sad. But yes, I think that, again, the work that you do, the work that I do watch a lot of YouTubers and TikTokers, but they're out there getting kicked off. Their algorithms are being shut down. They're being removed from my algorithms. And so again, we're in trouble. And I think that the right, they're not going to see the long term. It's all short term. How can they get personal gain? How can they control the narrative? But they're not seeing how all this long term deconstruction of democracy is how that's taking place. Or maybe they can. I've said reluctantly that the Republicans, or at least conservatives, we're playing tiddlywinks on the left. They're playing 3D chess on the right. That's how they were able to do gerrymandering, 20 years ago. That's affected our elections now. We're finally fighting back. But all of these little things on every single level of the media, of the government, they're looking at all of those things, and it's coming to fruition for them. However, they can get in power, but they can't keep it. They can't govern. And that's why we're in absolute chaos right now. That's why scholars from around the world are saying that we're so close to dictatorship and authoritarianism. And, we're losing our rights. We're not a democracy anymore. Now they're trying to take over the elections, so we can't have mail-in ballots. Any democracy should want to have more citizens vote, as many people to vote as possible, so we can be a true democracy and have that input of the people, by the people, for the people. Only certain people that know they can't get elected if the majority votes, they're the ones that try to prevent people from voting. And every study that has been done, every investigation has shown that when there is cheating or voter fraud, it's usually on the right. It's conservatives that are cheating.
It's minuscule, and when it happens, it's some rich guy that owns a house in 2 different states voting in both. Yeah.
Yes, there are not millions of dead Democrats voting. There's no study has ever shown that. Even the judges that were appointed by Trump have said there's no voter fraud here. This was a real election. You lost, but he refuses to think that he lost. And again, if you repeat the same thing over and over again, he thinks it becomes a truth, because it becomes a truth for him, but it still doesn't change reality.
There was a little German mustachioed guy that I think popularized that phrase. It might have been his buddy Goebbels that said that, but just repeat the lie enough times and people will believe it. So, and we'll come back to elections here a little bit later, but right now I want to move on. And we talked about Trump's state media apparatus. Well, let's talk about Trump's personal law enforcement apparatus. So, FBI Director Kash Patel admitted this week under oath that the FBI is buying location data on Americans from commercial data brokers with no warrant required, an outrageous end run around the Fourth Amendment that his predecessor, Christopher Wray, had specifically promised the agency had stopped. Patel's boss, Attorney General Pam Bondi, was subpoenaed this week to testify under oath before the House Oversight Committee. What she showed up to instead was what Representative Suhas Subramaniam of Virginia called a fake hearing under the guise of a briefing, unrecorded, untranscribed, and not under oath. She refused on multiple occasions to commit to following the subpoena. Why so evasive, Pam? Well, here's an example why. Representative Dan Goldman, the same day, exposed a portion of Bondi's cover-up by reading an unredacted Epstein document on the House floor that directly contradicts Trump's claims that he kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, proving She has been sitting on documents that blow a massive hole in the president's own story. Meanwhile, Leon Black, the billionaire whose name appears over 8,200 times in the Epstein files, just got out of having to be deposed when Bank of America settled with Jeffrey Epstein's survivors. Despite transferring over $150 million to Epstein and being accused of sexual misconduct in his own right, Black remains free and will likely never face real consequences. And speaking of getting off scot-free, Friday, the Department of Justice moved to permanently dismiss all remaining charges against the Louisville police officers who killed Breonna Taylor. And finally, in this thread on Friday night, Mueller passed away at age 81. Whatever you thought of Mueller, he was a decorated Vietnam veteran, a 12-year FBI director unanimously confirmed by both parties, and a man of unquestioned institutional integrity. Trump's response on Truth Social? Good. I'm glad he's dead. He can no longer hurt innocent people. So that's the contrast. Look how far we've fallen. Chrissy, calling it the Department of Justice is just Orwellian at this point, isn't it?
Truly. I don't know if maybe Pam Bondi was absent on this day in history class, but Richard Nixon never went to prison, but his attorney general sure did. And the sooner that these white women realize that the women who carry the most water for the patriarchy are the first to drown and die of thirst, the better off we will be as a country. We see Donald Trump as somebody who does not respect or care about women, and he is the first to put them on the front line to take the beatings for all of his terrible decisions that, granted, they enable, and they're happy to go along with it until it hurts them directly. I mean, you could see Christina, if she had the ability to move her face, you would have seen on her face just drop when they said someday he won't be president anymore, and we will still be looking for accountability from you. And I think I have to hope that some of these Republicans will start to wake up to the notion that he is not going to be the president forever. He is not going to be in charge forever, and there is going to come a day where people will still want some form of accountability from these people for the harm that they brought to this country. And they just continue to serve themselves and cover up their elitist pedophile class. And, we have a president who rapes children and associates himself with other people who raped children, and we are still unwilling to have any kind of accountability for this man. We got the Clintons to come and give depositions before that. Okay, well, now we've set a precedent that's okay to interview sitting and past presidents. Get his ass down here. Why are we not hearing from him? If he has nothing to hide, if he had anything to exonerate himself, he would be out there 24/7 waving that around. So
yeah, 100%. And there was some comments that I maybe had some technical difficulties and I didn't sound so great during the last part. Do I sound better now?
You do sound better. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. The old turn it off and turn it back on trick always seems to work. But Eric, well, to what Chrissy said, Trump's not going to be president forever. I worry that the next one's going to be even worse. Imagine competent people taking over this apparatus that they have built.
Yeah. So my thoughts are, say JD Vance by chance becomes, he's certainly smarter than Trump, possibly competent, but Trump has that charisma. He has, not to me, but apparently to half the country. He does have some hold, some charisma, some appealing, something that people love him. And JD Vance does not. So I think that when his term is over, I think that MAGA is greatly over, in my opinion. They will not rally around JD Vance. I think what Trump will want is a third term. That's what he'll try to keep. I think that others are already trying to run JD Vance, and from my understanding from different online media, Erica Kirk possibly as a vice presidential candidate, which I think would be absolutely ridiculous. But they're trying to give her more responsible posts. Like she's now on the advisory board of it's not the Air Force Academy. I'm trying to think what it.
I think it might be actually.
Yeah, the Air Force Academy. So so she's anyway. Trump will want to stay in office. Other people want him gone because even they know that he's erratic and has mental issues. But they will lose their power because I think a lot of their power is positional power with him. Without him, it's personality power. Without him in charge, they won't have the positional power anymore. I think that it'll completely fall apart. And I can't wait for all of them to be prosecuted and go to prison.
Yeah, there's so many threads just in this section I would love to continue pulling on, but I unfortunately have to sort of get us back on track here. And I mentioned in this last no, it's my fault. So I sort of mentioned in this last segment, we mentioned the passing of Robert Mueller, someone who spent his time as a committed institutionalist. Well, let's talk about someone else who claims to be a committed institutionalist. And this week, Chief Justice John Roberts pushed back on Trump for attacking federal judges who've ruled against him, telling, quote, prominent figures, he refused to call out Trump by name, to dial down the personal hostility toward the judiciary. It is a defense of institutional independence, but here's the thing. Roberts and his Supreme Court had a real chance to hold Trump accountable after January 6th, and they chose not to. So his words this week ring hollow. Now, in other courts below the top level, a mixed bag this week. Arizona's Attorney General filed criminal charges against Kalshi, the prediction market platform, over illegal gambling and election wagering. I think that's a genuinely good move. But in Georgia, a woman there was charged with attempted murder under that state's restrictive abortion law for taking medication to end her pregnancy. With Indiana's near-total abortion ban and our own raging Christian nationalist Attorney General Todd Rokita, it's only a matter of time before we see something like that here. Maybe he'll send police drones after Hoosier women because that's a thing that exists now. Eric, up in your neck of the woods at South Bend, police just launched a drone as first responder program, and there are legitimate uses for that technology. For example, it's much safer to track a runaway driver with a drone remotely than engaging in a high-speed chase. But this is a very slippery slope, and even scarier is a story out of Common Dreams that I've got linked this week in the show notes. AI-powered robot dogs, pictured there on the screen for you who are watching, are now guarding data centers across the country. How long before the police have their own robot dogs to round people up? And if they do round people up, where are they going to send them? Perhaps to a place like Indiana State Prison in my hometown of Michigan City, where just this week, another inmate was seriously injured in a cell fire caused by an electrical short. This comes like just days after a major investigation by Indianapolis station WTHR, which revealed how inmates have been burned to death in their cells at that facility. Chrissy, what kind of dystopian nightmare is this?
Much like ICE, our prison system is beyond reform at this point, and we need to be seriously looking at total abolition and the way that we conduct ourselves as a society. The other thing we're going to have to do as Democrats, when we get back into power, we got to stop pussyfooting around. We're going to have to expand the Supreme Court. We're going to have to codify Roe. We are going to have to do something. And all the norms are out the window. Like a lot of yes, Trump is violating the law in a lot of times, but a lot of times he's violating just sort of unsaid rules and norms that have kind of, up until this point, largely kept the lid on things. That's out the window now. Okay. And if Democrats don't take a similar, not so much, I don't want to say slash and burn, but like guns blazing, like we have an agenda, we got shit to do. Like if they don't come in and start actually being effective, we're cooked, absolutely. So I think there's some real changes that we can make, but we're going to have to get serious about it because we've seen how serious the other side is about destroying this country and hurting our people. We need to be 10 times as serious about protecting people and pushing back. The Republicans and Trump embolden folks to be the absolute worst, most vile, racist, horrible version of themselves. We need to embolden people to be their bravest, most courageous, strongest, united version of themselves.
Yeah, and Eric, Chrissy said pussyfooting, and I can't think of a bigger pussyfooter than John Roberts, who we mentioned at the top of that paragraph. Like, I don't want to hear a damn thing this guy has to say at this point. Like, dude, you guys had your chance. You went along with everything. You thought, oh, we can control this beast. No, you can't.
No. And I think that a perfect example of how Trump operates is anyone that's ever been an ally or worked with him or for him, he will betray them in a second. So as soon as they come up with a ruling that he doesn't agree with, now he attacks them. And he appointed most of them. He appointed, I think, 3. The majority of them that have been appointed by anyone, he appointed them. And so, and he turned on them. If you don't agree with him, you are his enemy. And he will betray you. He will backstab you. He will throw you under the bus. He will send you to prison. He will do all of those things to protect himself. I imagine he would even betray his own family to protect himself. You know, no one is safe working with him. But you did talk about these police dogs. It reminds me of that Black Mirror episode. I don't know if you watch Black Mirror, but I love it. English. It's on Netflix, but an English sci-fi series, or it comes out periodically. But they have an episode where these dogs are tracking humans, and it is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying.
I'm just waiting for Todd Rokita's army of robot dogs to round up Hoosier women. You looking forward to that, Chrissy?
No, I will hit it with my car. I am a vegan, and I will run that dog over.
Well, I think there's no meat involved. I think you're safe.
There we go.
So Chrissy mentioned, that Democrats have to actually like do the damn thing and go big or go home when we ever take back power, if we have free and fair elections. And, we do still have elections, and they do seemingly still count, at least for now. And we had one this week over in Illinois. Our neighbors held their primaries, and Lieutenant Governor there, Julia Stratton, won the Democratic primary to replace retiring Senator Dick Durbin, solidifying Governor J.B. Pritzker's political clout with his preferred candidate. He is a potential 2028 presidential candidate. Stratton ran on a genuinely progressive platform: Medicare for all, abolishing ICE. In Illinois' 9th district, however, it was a little messier. AIPAC spent a ton of money there backing their preferred candidate, who finished 3rd. Now, Kat Abugazala, a progressive who I really like, ran, but she finished 2nd in that race behind Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss. He's not an AIPAC guy, and his platform on paper is solid, though some progressives have called him a Pino, a progressive in name only. Now, let's turn to our own state here, where we have election news as we're gearing up for our own primaries on May 5th. A new law signed by Governor Mike Braun this legislative session gave a judicial selection committee in Marion County power to keep judges off the ballot there. And this week, that committee unanimously voted one Marion County judge unfit to serve. This is the first time that they've used that new authority. Now, turning to Braun himself, he's suing his former campaign treasurer for gross negligence, claiming destroyed files and miscalculations cost him a $159,000 FEC fine. It reeks like he's passing the buck for his own corruption, but that's just me editorializing. Meanwhile, Braun's MAGA ally, James Bopp, has been fighting in court to keep a candidate with the same last name as his preferred candidate off the ballot in an effort to unseat incumbent Republican Senator Greg Good. This week, a judge ordered a halt to absentee ballot distribution and assigned a new judge in that case, which is part of a broader attack on the Republican state senators who voted against Trump's redistricting plan in December. Dark money groups tied to U.S. Senator Jim Banks are spending on TV and radio ads, attacking those incumbents who crossed Trump. Those ads claim these senators opposed President Trump's plan to remove liberal Democrats from Congress, and Trump has endorsed primary challengers against all of them. So, democracy is messy, certainly, but at least it's still happening. Chrissy, I don't know. Your thoughts on the electoral angle. Is this a case of Republicans eating themselves? Is it going to matter come the general election?
Anytime that Republicans are doing the heavy lifting and punching their own and doing the work for us, that's fine. I do think it's very interesting now, like if we look at the race out of Texas, where we now have the runoff between Ken Paxton and John Cornyn, a seat that the Republicans have held so safely for so many years. They have not had to spend a single dollar, and now they're anticipated to spend an additional $200 million over the next couple of months. I love that for them. Like any amount of money that we can waste. Like, when has Indiana been a competitive seat for Republicans? When have they needed to dump money into Indiana to keep Republicans safe? Like, they're obviously scared. They saw the Republicans in our state house reject the redistricting and gerrymandering effort, and I think in a certain sense we're starting to see at least maybe our state house leadership look beyond the Trump years and say, this guy's not going to be in power forever. We would still like to be in power. So maybe we don't align ourselves so closely with him. I do just have to call out the absolute irony of Mike Braun referring to anyone as unfit to serve in their position, seeing as who that is coming from. That is just incredibly rich. And as far as the lawsuit, it's my understanding that when you sue someone, you have to have some kind of tort or harm or claim that this hurt you in some way. Dude, you got elected governor. Like, how did this hurt you in any way, shape, or form? Like, you're just greedy, trying to money grab and cover up your own corruption going on there. But it's indicative to me of this larger infighting. The Indiana Republican Party has managed to do what the Indiana Democratic Party has not been able to do, and that is break the Republican Party. There is so much infighting and so many personal pet projects, and people are jockeying for position and who can be the most loyal to Trump and who can kiss up to Mike Braun and Micah Beckwith the most, and they're not getting anything done. And I think people are starting to realize that. They're like, hey, you guys have been in charge for 20 years. Food is more expensive. Gas is more expensive. Our bills are up. Our roads suck. Like, you're getting ready to make our terrible roads toll roads now too. You want us to pay to drive on the terrible roads that you won't fix? Like, if he just wants to keep stepping in it, I mean, I'm not going to stop him, but Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah. Well, I think we saw, Chrissy, the recent poll from, it was published by Politico. I don't know if they conducted the poll, but that showed that Mike Braun's got like a 25% approval rating. He's the least popular governor in the country, so hopefully he drags down that whole ticket top to bottom. Now, he's not on the ballot this November, unfortunately, so we'll see how that turns out. But Eric, I want to ask you about our friends over in Illinois this week. I don't know, were you paying attention to that Senate race? What do you think of Juliana Stratton?
Yeah, a little bit. And I do like her very much. And I love their governor. My mom, who's 86-year-old, she loves him too and thinks he would be a great presidential candidate. But no, I think that's really exciting. I also think it's exciting that, some of the people that won and some who didn't win. So I think that although that is Illinois and much different than Indiana, Illinois is kind of a Democratic stronghold and a liberal stronghold, but so no real surprise, but I'm excited to see what happens. I love the fact of some of the comments Chrissy made about Republicans fighting each other here. And I think some things that came to mind is like power corrupts and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. Like, when you have so much power in a state for so long, they're just so corrupt. And they keep saying the Democrats are corrupt. We don't control anything. Finally, some are getting some moral standing that says this is just too much. This is too much. We need to, and so they're fighting back. And now Trump is fighting them for fighting back against him and not allowing Indiana to help him win another unfair election. And so, I was really proud of Indiana at that moment when they voted against that gerrymandering or changing the voting districts to wipe out Democratic voices completely. I was very proud. And now, unfortunately, some people that had a little bit of a moral compass, they're being attacked by their own party because of that. But again, when is it absolutely just too much? We know that it's unfair. We know it's unconstitutional. Some of the things they're doing. We know that it's completely the opposite of what the Trump administration promised to do. And Braun and our Attorney General are just following along whatever Trump says, or institutions are being investigated for DEI, even though they got rid of all their DEI people and their departments. They're still under investigation. And so, I'm not sure where it's all going, but if they want to spend $200 million on a primary, that's great.
You guys go ahead. Well, you'll love to see it, and to your point, one party rule in Indiana has certainly led to corruption and poor governance. Ironically, the Republicans say the same thing about Illinois and one party rule there, and there are certainly plenty of examples of that as well. One party rule is bad. The two party system is bad. Let's just tear the whole thing down and start over again. I don't know. It's
Okay.
time to turn it off and turn it back on, right?
Yeah.
So I want to turn to a different topic, but we're going to stay in Indiana as we begin here, and got a couple organized labor stories I did want to mention. So BP locked out more than 800 union workers at their refinery, up in Whiting in the far northwest corner of the state after contract negotiations there failed. The company demanded workers cut more than 100 jobs, accept pay cuts to nearly all positions, and give up certain bargaining rights. This lockout comes as energy prices are spiking. We led the show talking about that crisis, of course, but BP says it doesn't expect any disruptions to production because they're bringing in non-union replacement workers and outside contractors to operate the refinery. Scabs. Meanwhile, out in Colorado, thousands of workers shut down one of the nation's biggest meatpacking plants, the JBS facility in Greeley. The largely immigrant workforce there, many of them recent arrivals from Haiti, voted overwhelmingly to strike despite facing deportation threats under Trump's immigration crackdown. These are among the most exploited, underpaid workers in the country, performing some of the most dangerous jobs. Now, one person who historically fought for largely Latino mistreated workers was UFW leader Cesar Chavez, but his reputation took a devastating hit this week when a New York Times investigation revealed multiple accusations of rape and sexual abuse against the labor icon, including allegations he abused two girls in the 1970s and raped his co-founder, Dolores Huerta. The fallout has been swift. Celebrations have been canceled, and organizations are rushing to take his name off of schools and community centers. Chrissy, how do we reconcile when terrible people have done good things? The material gains that Chavez won for farm workers, like better wages and better working conditions, are very much real, but so are the crimes that he is credibly accused of committing. How do we honor what was won without honoring who won it?
Yeah. And I think this is where it's important to remember that just multiple things can be true at once. And I think this is where we differ from the other side, because we don't have that same sense of blind loyalty and just rejection of, the most final act was they commanded you to ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears and listen to what only they told you. We're still unwilling to do that. We're still willing to examine the gestalt of something and say, yes, this person made these contributions to our society, but that does not insulate them from criticism. It doesn't undo any, harm that they have done. We look at all of the people who we consider to be quote unquote good people who've contributed to our society, who are on like the Epstein list, for example. How do you start to square that circle? And what is the criteria for who we forgive and who we choose to, not forgive? And we know that history is always, rewritten by the winners, and it's going to be whitewashed. And we know that we're going to get a very specific version of what that looks like. It is incredibly unfortunate because he did so much to bring awareness to workers' rights and protections for workers' rights, which here in Indiana are just abysmal. We have a so-called right to work state, which is the right to lose your job over nothing. And I want to sort of tie this back to another conversation that we were having about the justice system in this country. I don't want it to be lost on anyone that this push to get rid of our immigrants and get rid of the people doing these labor positions, our administration, our country fully intends to fill those positions with prison labor. Our justice system is set up to incarcerate and entrap people and keep them incarcerated and in the system. And because once they are in that system and they are a ward of the state, you can legally exploit their labor. And we see it across industries all across this country. And we know that if you turn around and you don't have folks to build in your furniture factories or pick your fruit, you're not going to turn around and offer Noah and Samantha $15 an hour to do it. You're going to go find somebody else who will do it for the price that you were paying or less. And the quickest way to do that is the millions of incarcerated people that we have in this country. So I don't want anyone to act surprised when that's what starts to happen here.
Oh, 100%. 13th Amendment, right? Abolish slavery except as punishment for a crime. That's a big ass loophole right there. Eric, thoughts, we've talked about, like, separating the art from the artist, right? We talk about, like, David Bowie and some of the stuff he did in the 70s. And I'm a Led Zeppelin guy. Those guys, a credible accusation against them. You look at more frequently, we're talking about Chavez and these allegations against him and the rush to remove his name from things. Where's I think Donald Trump has at least as many credible accusations against him. Where's the rush to remove him from things?
Yeah, that it's so leaving Donald Trump out, it's absolutely heartbreaking. It's just, one that was really tough for me was Bill Cosby. Growing up at the time that I did with no positive Black images on TV, and then the Cosby Show comes out, like, he absolutely was a godsend. Like, I loved him, and so many people. He was beloved, like the most beloved television father ever. And then when all of that came out, some people, dumped him. He lost a lot of stuff. People gave scholarships money back to him that he had donated scholarships in his name. And so it's just absolutely heartbreaking. And I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do because, Cesar Chavez did a lot. And how do you separate? It doesn't undo the good that they did, but it does tarnish who they are. But it also reminds me that people are human and they're monsters and they're horrible and they make terrible decisions sometimes. And I absolutely in no way want to validate what he did. I'm just saying it's just really hard when you have someone that, like I hear people talk about Dr. King and he was a womanizer or whatever, and that does not undo everything that he did. He sacrificed his life to make America better, to make America more true to our own Constitution. So I don't know what to do with that. But what I would love is for us to hold Donald Trump as accountable as we do for everybody else. I remember his name just jumped out of my head. I think he was a senator from Minnesota. He was a comedian. And
Al Franken.
Al Franken. Like, he didn't get a trial. He didn't get nothing. He was accused of, there was another comedian that fell asleep on a plane and he put his hands, he didn't touch her. He just put him over her breasts.
It was part of a bit.
Her.
Yeah.
Right. And they saw that, didn't mention the context or anything. And he stepped down from his position. And I think we got replaced by, a Tea Partier. Was Michelle Bachmann?
No, she was a Smith, I believe, wound up winning that seat. So a Democrat kept it. But I mean, like that, the scope of the accusations, right? Versus what Franken faced. It was for doing a bit without someone's consent versus Trump, for example. Deplorable. Yeah.
So it's heartbreaking. I don't know. I don't know where I stand on it. I don't want to in any way condone rape or abuse or any of that. But I also don't know how to separate that. We can't undo all the good that someone did based on some horrible thing they did as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm of the opinion that we have to be able to discuss these things with nuance, I guess, and we shouldn't valorize anybody or put them on a pedestal too much because people are flawed and human and messy And
Agreed.
so if you're up on a pedestal too high, that's a long way to fall. So I want to turn to our final story this week, and this week is the 101st anniversary of the 1925 tri-state tornado, which cut a 219-mile-long path of destruction across Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, killing 695 people. They don't make them like they used to. We haven't seen anything like that in the 101 years since, but they certainly make more of them than they used to. In the last year alone, we've seen 2 tornadoes touch down and cause damage here in the Bloomington area. A few weeks ago, Eric, up in your area, a storm raged across the South Bend area, touching down on the Michigan side of the state line and causing significant damage there. And then just last week, another tornado touched down in Lake Village, Indiana, killing 2 people there. Chrissy, are we Tornado Alley now?
I mean, this is sort of something that comes along with when we talk about global warming is a misnomer. When we talk about climate change, people automatically think global warming and they think the planet is getting hotter. But what it actually is a more extreme swing in the conditions that create weather. And so as long as we are ignoring our duty to the rest of the world to mitigate the effects of man-made effects of climate change, we're going to continue to see these stronger storm systems, these brutally cold winters, followed by these oppressively hot summers, and the extremes are just going to get more extreme. And if we are not serious about developing the infrastructure and the social safety nets to support people who are going to undoubtedly be impacted by these weather events, then we are doing a grave disservice to our community. I know here locally, our county council and our township boards do a tremendous job of helping keep folks out of crisis, especially immediately following a natural disaster, something like a tornado or an earthquake or something like that. But now we see a threat from our state level government to eradicate or consolidate our township governments, which are really the boots on the ground first responders when we have these kind of catastrophic events. And so I'm curious, and also I shudder to think about what those impacts will be when we have removed that first line of reprieve for people who have been hit by these kinds of storms that are inevitably going to continue if we don't course correct very quickly on how we are treating our planet.
I think, Eric, that just in that last week, we had temperatures in the 70s, fueling this front. The tornado, that front came through with a cold front behind it. The tornado's on the leading edge of that. It snowed the next day. And now I think it's supposed to be 84 degrees outside here in Bloomington this afternoon. It is March 22nd. What in like a lion, out like a lamb, that llamas and monkeys in between, cats and dogs living together. It's madness.
I saw a great meme a few years ago. It was like Sharknado versus the polar vortex with polar bears in the vortex. But I don't think I can explain it better than Chrissy did. But yeah, we're just seeing extremes all the time. This was the coldest winter we've had up here in the longest time, and snow was on the ground. Normally we'll have a snowstorm up here in South Bend. It'll last maybe a few days. The snow will be on the ground a few days. It's cold and it's gray all the time, but the snow was not always there. We had snow on top of snow on top of snow on top of snow for about a month and a half. My snow blower got more work. Every time someone called me, I'm like, oh, I'll call you right back. I have to go shovel the snow. And it was like twice a day sometimes too. And that we've never had to do that consistently. So, then it got warm, it all melted. Then there was flooding, and then there's a tornado, and then it snowed again, and now it's warm again. So yes, I guess the good news is if you don't like the weather, wait a day. It's going to change.
Well, that's the old joke, right? You don't like the weather in Indiana, wait 15 minutes and it'll change. And so, but I think that trope gets used to dismiss climate change. Well, it's always been like unpredictable. No, not like this. It hasn't.
Not the extremes.
So,
Like, it might change a little bit slightly, but it's not these extreme temperatures and weather. And it's dangerous to a lot of people, you know.
yeah, I mean, Chrissy, we've had these 2 touchdowns here in Monroe County within the last year. The one last year was like 2/3 of a mile from my house. The one last month was 2 blocks from my brother-in-law's house. It's scary stuff, and you know it hits close to home certainly, but these things are unpredictable, and every Hoosier is vulnerable. You know.
Absolutely. And some, I mean, more vulnerable than others. We just criminalized homelessness in our infinite wisdom in the state of Indiana. So now folks who otherwise may have been who may have been unhoused, but in communication with supportive services, who would at least know that they were out there, that we would need to look for these people in case of an emergency. They're no longer going to be telling people that they are living on public lands or in the woods or in an encampment or somewhere. And so we are exponentially increasing the risk to those already most vulnerable.
It's a travesty. It really is. Well, I hate to leave things on a down note, but my God, look at everything we just talked about for the last 2 hours. I suppose that is appropriate. Well, I appreciate you both being here with me to talk about these unpleasant things. At least it's good to have good company. So if folks liked what you all had to say and would like to maybe get in touch with you online, if that's something you would like, you can say, hey, don't talk to me. That's fine too. But you know, you're both public facing folks. Chrissy, let me start with you. Where can the good folks find you online, on social media, or however you'd like them to find you?
Yeah. So I, along with the rest of my team, I monitor our county party social media page. So Monroe County Democratic Party on Facebook, on Instagram. If you find my personal Instagram on there, you can add me to. You feel free to email me. My email is chair@monroedems.org. Anybody can email me if you have questions. I'm happy to help you, even if you don't live in Monroe County. I can maybe at least point you in the direction to talk to somebody who can get you where you need to go.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Eric, how about you? Where can the good folks find you?
A lot of social media, elove1911. Or my personal email is ericlove1911@gmail.com. If you're interested in consulting, you can go to LinkedIn. If you're interested in political stuff, email me or look at the other social media. Before we end, I just want to say, Scott, I appreciate you so much and the work that you do. I know it's hard work. It's time consuming. You do a lot of research. You are so valuable. Thank you. And Chrissy, I wish you the absolute best. The Democrats in Monroe County are in good hands. I'll be down to visit sometime soon. I'll hit you up and we can do coffee or something. And I'd love to meet you in person.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, Eric, you're going to make me blush. I appreciate that. You're going to turn me as red as the colors of that 1911, I believe you're referencing. That's your fraternity, isn't it?
That is true. Always right there with me.
There we go. I remembered things. I wanted to give you an opportunity to shout them out. I know it means a lot to you. So you folks can catch me tonight. I will be back on these same channels hosting a virtual town hall with 7th District Congressional candidate Destiny Wells. A lot more coming up on Progressive Indiana Network this week. Derek Holder of the Hold 'em Accountable podcast has 3 candidate interviews. Monday with House candidate Rachel Bleicher. On Wednesday, State Senate candidate Scott Holdison up in the region there. And on Friday, Kokomo area State Senate candidate Kirsten Root will be with Derek. On Tuesday, I will be hosting a Who's Left Live at 7 p.m. with a legend in Indiana circles. Sheila Kennedy will be with me Tuesday night. Get to pick her brain. She has seen a lot in her 50-odd years of public service in this state. And then on Thursday, of course, Concerned Clergy of Indianapolis will be releasing their podcast through us first thing Thursday morning. The Recovered Republican, Brianna Newhart, has a live Friday at 1 p.m. with State House candidate Devin Wellington there in the 29th District. And hey, this coming Saturday is No King's Day. So get yourself out there. Go to a protest near you. Unfortunately, I will not be able to host a marathon live stream for this one as I did for the last one. I have prior commitments. But I'm sure a lot of our PIN folks will be doing something that day. More details to come. But do not let Saturday and going out to protest be the end of it. You know, one day is great, but let that be an entry point for you if you're not already engaging in some form of activism. So let me take this time now to sign off. Again, you can follow me on social media at whosleft.us on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads. On the others, it is simply at HoosLeft. That's HOOS left. Again, follow Progressive Indiana Network at the full spelled out name on most of your social media sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, where you have a limited number of characters, it's PIN Indiana. Again, we could really use your help with a follow wherever you're at, and we deeply, deeply appreciate paid subscriptions at progressiveindiana.net. So do that if you can. Until next week, Scott Aaron Rogers signing off. Love each other, Indiana.